How did embodying him change how you view art, and how do you define art?
God, that's a... I'm not gonna say it! I'm not gonna say it!
We almost got him! Down to the wire! So close. Welcome to Second Home Hollywood. This is That's a Great Question. We are here teaming up with Multi-House Studios, and I am honored today to welcome the great Jared Harris.
In the urban jungle.
In the urban jungle.
Read comic books when I was a kid a lot. Did Garfield do 3 Spider-Mans or 2?
2, he was supposed to do a third.
I read the second one.
Okay.
Yeah, the one with the lizard man in it.
Yeah, you were always my headcanon for the MCU Dr. Otto Octavius. And then Alfred Molina's No Way Home messed that up because now he's already met an Otto.
Oh, well, you wouldn't want to go in his footsteps.
Yeah, Alfred Molina's a titan of that space.
Yeah. So, I haven't really seen those things. The one time that happened was you have to go to an office and sit in a room, sign in, sit down. You can't walk out. You have to have the script there, read it while you're there. You can't make any notes. You can't take any pictures. And it's all like top secret stuff, which I think is kind of ridiculous.
Well, that ties directly into my opening.
Those fucking comic books are out there.
Yeah, we have the source material at the store.
Yeah.
So the fandom audience at Real Rejects is very strong, and you've been a part of a lot of fandoms with Resident Evil, with Robot Chicken, Sherlock Holmes became huge, and by way of Watchmen, I consider you part of the big two, because you did Morbius for Marvel, and then you were a voice in the Watchmen animated freighter.
Yeah.
So you're canon in all of it.
I auditioned for Rorschach.
Yeah.
For the Watchmen. That's actually one of my regrets.
It was the Watchmen
I would
miss?
love to have done that one, yeah.
I was wondering about that. I heard you loved Rorschach, and I always find I revisit that comic and he's a new person to me. Every time I get a little older, there's a different Rorschach coming back at me. What draws you to Rorschach as you've read him over the years of those originals?
He's a complete nut job, and yet he makes complete sense.
Yeah.
In fact, he's the person who's actually sees clearly what's happening and has an extreme response or an answer to it. And of course, because you find out a bit about what his background was, so that you understand what's driving that behavior, which is also fascinating. But someone who's that far out on the edge, but also has a very clear understanding and rule, if you like, about how they perceive the world. I mean, in a way, that's the same thing that works for Chigurh in No Country for Old Men, is that they have a rule about how they approach what happens, that a standard. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it kind of makes you feel as though you're fascinated by characters like that, because it's not random, you know? And I said, maybe one feels as though that if you can understand what the rule is, you have a chance of surviving. It's the same thing with Lecter, you know?
Yeah, it's a beautiful through line. I always felt like he was my Tyler Durden, where when I was a kid, I thought he was just cool, and then I realized the negativity of that insanity and how he becomes the antagonist as you mature in the book. And I always found like Hunter S. Thompson reminded me of Rorschach, and how I wonder when I look back at Hunter as I get older, how that perception is going to change, because these figures of madness you're drawn to, but what is it about you that's drawn to them? And I feel like fandom is a beautiful thing for that, these morality tales with these villains. Is there any fandom that you're invested in that might surprise people? Like, is there anything that you're devotedly reading or wandering in?
I just want to say, this is a slight repurposing of a quote in Northern Ireland, but madness is the only sane response to the world once you understand what's going on. I really loved his Dark Material books.
Yeah.
They were fantastic. That was the first time, since I read the Lord of the Rings trilogy books, that I just got so completely immersed into this fantasy world that just it lived in one's mind in such clarity.
Okay, fair. I want to stick with comics then, because I definitely know those, and I love that you love them. I heard you love Deathlock.
I love Deathlock!
Deathlock's one of my favorites, man. He's so ridiculous.
I can't wait for that to happen, yeah.
What do you think makes Deathlock so unique in that era of cyborg 90s? Like, Marvel did a lot of those, but Deathlock resonates and stays true to himself. What do you think his rule is, like Chigurh?
Well, he represents the conflict, which is interesting in light of what's going on with all these union negotiations, of a conflict between humanity and technology, right? So he's constantly at war with himself, arguing with his other side of his cybernetic brain, right, about how to pursue his goals and what the correct response is, and he's trying. Each of them is, in a way, it's struggling to reconnect with his humanity, which obviously he's lost because half of his body's gone, and he's like this, sort of weird mix of the Terminator and the $6 Million Man, and he's like some strange mix of all this stuff, and it's an example or a cipher of what we are as people trying to come to terms with, which is how do we live with increasing levels of technology in our world as it's starting to do things for us, take over for us, remove us from experiences.
And he's the physical representation of that, because he's physically being.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, I know you love Swamp Thing, and to me, he's the other side of that coin. He's nature to humanity. And I've always seen them as kind of like parallel in an interesting way, that Deathlock is technology taking over humanity and humans are taking over the planet. And Swamp Thing, the green, he's always fighting the green. What's your first memory of the moment Swamp Thing hit for you? Because he's like poetry, there's like prose in it.
Well, I mean, there's the Alan Moore ones, and that the first series was, quite supernatural and dealt with the occult, and it kind of touched on those old comics I used to read, like Creepy and Eerie and stuff like that. And then the second one is this sort of wild, metaphysical, existential journey. It's sort of not too dissimilar to the Odysseus's journey. It's the Odyssey, essentially, right? He's separated from the woman he loves, and he travels all throughout the universe, and he's trying to find his way back to her, which is Odysseus's journey over 10 years at the end of the Trojan War.
But with Barry Windsor Smith art and just stunning storytelling in between.
And just doing some crazy things. And of course there's also the element of the sort of Frankenstein monster, in that he is his own monster.
Yeah.
And that he's, again, it's interesting as a theme in that he doesn't have a perfect memory of who he was. And he's trying to discover that, which is what's bringing him to her.
Yeah, that's the pull, which is beautiful for an actor to portray. Like that movie, it's been interesting to see a lot of actors come out saying like Swamp Thing's the one I want. Like I just talked to Vincent D'Onofrio about him wanting to be Swamp Thing out for James Mangold.
He'd be great.
He'd be beautiful. And like the power in that voice. But what would you want to bring of yourself to a Swamp Thing if the DC stars aligned?
Well, they won't, but...
I can see it, man. I want it.
The one that I was interested in is the second half of that story, was that sort of the Odysseus journey.
Yeah.
But I think the first half of the Alan Moore thing would be quite tough to do. I mean, what that culminates in, I don't know if you remember, I'm not sure.
The end of the Alan Moore feels
the first half of because there's two sections to it.
Oh right, there's two giant omnibuses.
Yeah.
Is the first ending,
one is the conflict between good and evil.
Right.
Right.
And the ending kind of goes in a very Neil Gaiman place. It feels almost Sandman-y in its abstraction, if I remember correctly.
Incredibly abstract, but also you then go into almost like Eastern mysticism. It's like one can't exist without the other.
Which I think could translate if they got the right visual director.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It ends in a big handshake.
Yeah. I don't know if that's gonna work. Yeah, I don't know if the audience would go like, we've gone through this. Yeah. Hey, I forgot about that ending because I didn't accept it as a kid, I think. I think my brain was like, no, there's gotta be more. We're talking about fandoms, and I adore the Dumbledore your dad played, and I think that fandom is so powerful. Since you love fantasy and the fandoms, what was it like for you to watch your dad play, I think, one of the best translations of a book to screen?
Yeah, I was disappointed. Obviously, he died. And I think and Gambon was wonderful, but I know that he would have enjoyed the part more and more as it became more complicated and you realized just how sort of deeply behind the events he was from the very beginning, and I think he would have liked all that. The storytelling was almost done through the eyes of the younger characters, and one of the clever things that they did is as those characters aged, and their perceptions of the world became more complicated, the story becomes more complicated and become nuanced and became more dangerous. I think he would have enjoyed that. My favorite one of the movies is Goblet of Fire.
Yeah, that book's my favorite of all of them. The actual scope of a Triwizard Tournament made it feel so real.
But also, somebody dies, and that's when it gets real. You know what I mean? And it's a kid who dies.
Right.
I talk about this with, I talked about this with people several times, which is that the genius of Spielberg in Jaws is that he killed a kid, the second person who dies. And as soon as you do that, everything, all the rules are off the table, because you're not allowed to do that. I tried to explain once to a director who was like, are we making a kid's movie or an adult's movie? And I said, let's imagine there's a swimming pool, and at the bottom of the swimming pool's full of piranha. At the bottom of the swimming pool, there's an adult. There's someone trying to get out, right? And they've got 60 seconds of air left. If a child dives into the water to save them, they're going to get out, okay? Because you can't have a kid eaten by piranhas. And if an adult jumps in, okay, the adult could be killed.
Yeah.
That's the difference between the two films. And what Spielberg did is, everyone's fair game in this movie.
I love that, because that's what I feel like the Marvel and DC approach finally is with comic book characters. They finally realize that there have to be stakes, and the movies that don't have stakes don't work. No. The movies that have the kid jump in, we don't see anymore. And the ones that are breaking your hearts are Guardians.
No, yes, you have to say that. It's one of the problems that they got into eventually on Game of Thrones as plot armor for the characters, which is, at some point you're going to have to start sacrificing characters to go, so that you realize that nobody's safe in this world.
That actually brings me to my next point. I love this interview you did with Tom Green on the Larry King show. It was a beautiful interview, and I love seeing Tom Green so focused and in. But you talked about things that frighten you should drive you, this force behind being afraid in your career. Yeah. Do you use that thought process in other walks of life, where you're drawn to things that make you go I don't know, and it pushes you that way?
When I was younger.
Yeah. Fair.
You know what I mean? Now you don't bounce.
That's true, man. It's harder to get up every day.
Yeah.
Do you find that fear when you're working fades when you find the character? Is there a switch when once you found it and it registers that the fear goes away and then you're embodying something else?
No, and the reason is I think there's a misconception, and it would be this, is that you can do all the research you want. You can live as the character. If you're paying a sort of a Nova Scotia fisherman, you can go to Nova Scotia and you can work on fishing boats for months at a time, whatever, and really feel you understand that world and everything. But you don't actually know who the character is until you do it.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start doing it, it informs you, immediately starts to inform you with information about who this person is and what they're experiencing and what they're feeling and how they're reacting to, because you can't plan all that stuff.
Right.
You've got an idea of where things might go. There's an excitement and a fear about what that's going to be like. I'm in front of the camera, figuring this stuff out in real time and being recorded. That's why take 2 and 3 are so useful.
Is that why you like the idea of fear in auditioning? Like wanting to audition for that rush of the unique, this is my getting one chance to deliver these 5 pages that are the entire encompassing version of the character that I'm bringing?
I don't think I was a very good auditioner. But yes. First of all, any day with acting in is a good day. So and if you're auditioning, you're acting.
Yeah.
That's fun. And you don't know what's going to happen. Again, you have a plan about how this might go, but then sometimes you do your plan and you're disappointed.
Right.
And other times it goes off somewhere else and it's great.
Yeah, the spontaneity of the room is so unique. I think Zoom was really tricky for a lot of actors for 3 years, just trying to get that energy.
Yeah, and make a connection with people and talk to people. I auditioned for Mad Men, and I was given 2 scenes, I think, or 3 scenes. And they changed all the names of the characters because they don't want you to get an idea that, because the pages are they're out there in the world. So I didn't know who I would eventually be having these scenes with. They don't give you the script, so you've got really nothing to go on, and all I saw was this person who was offering the same job to 2 people.
Right.
Right? So my mind, I thought, well, he's a Machiavel. There was no explanation for why he was doing this, but he was fucking with these people. And when I auditioned, after I did the first one, Matt said, no. Why does everyone keep doing it like this? No. He goes, that's not what this is. What this is you've been told to offer this job to these 2 people, and you think it's a stupid idea, but that's what you've been told by your bosses. So you're doing it, but it's like some idea of creating competition within the workplace, and it's a stupid idea.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to then immediately come up with a completely different character, which again then goes back to when I was at drama school, the principal of our drama school said, you know, you aren't going to have weeks of rehearsal to prepare anything. You have to learn how to sketch.
Yeah.
Because you might have 30 seconds or 3 minutes to come up with something, and you've got to be able to like, okay, this is what this idea is, and have an outline and then do it. So that's essentially what happened.
I love that. You have to be so on your feet.
Yeah, and it kind of suddenly the character there was a kind of a humor to the character because he was in this stupid situation as well. But that wouldn't have happened really, probably.
If it was through tape or a Zoom, there's no opportunity there. Well, I want to land on the Mad Men Chernobyl of it all, but first, I was looking at the insane directors you've worked with, and it's a staggering Fincher, Ritchie, Mann, M. Night, Soderbergh, Spielberg, Jarmusch, Reitman, some of my all-time favorite directors. So I want to go back like reverse chronologically, but I want to start with one of my favorite films that not enough people talk about. Man from U.N.C.L.E. is, I think, one of the best spy films ever made, including the Bonds, the Bournes, the Mission Impossibles. But there's this kinetic energy that Guy Ritchie has that manages to be on and off the rails at the same time, where you feel like it could tip, but he's got this pace. What are his sets like? Is it more precision or more chaotic?
Very relaxed. Yeah, I mean, he's not a person who flaps or is flustered at all. So he actually plays beautifully on the guitar. So the two of them were jamming together and he was helping Guy learn. That's what we were doing in the tent, waiting for setups. On Sherlock Holmes, he was playing chess.
So the opposite of the energy of the movie, he's just like a piece to him.
And he's basically, he really respects, he doesn't grind his crew down. You will always end early on a Friday, you know, so that they can have a weekend. There's just never any stress.
Speaking of Sherlock.
And it's fun. You know, what the most important thing is like there's always a sense of invention and fun happening, you know what I mean? And he finds things that make him have a little tinkle of humor and a response to it. And so that there's a lot of flexibility, certainly from my experience on those two, there's a lot of flexibility, I mean, including in terms of the script. I mean, on Sherlock Holmes, we pretty much shot to the end at the first thing I did, about the second or third thing I did. And it was 15 pages long, unpacking the whole script of a story you haven't done yet. You know?
So you haven't lived the thing you're describing as
I mean, and so you're not, what are you referring to? But he and Robert had a really clear idea about what it was they were going to be doing, you know, and we sat in Robert's trailer and we ad-libbed and improvised for about 5 or 6 hours, and we came up with about 6 pages, and then we started to shoot that.
Wow.
And then, you know, then we kind of rehearsed again over the next couple of days and got more of it together. But, and of course it was not the sort of exposition-heavy thing that the 15 pages had been previously, about explaining everything, you know?
Yeah. That you found a flow with the creators all in the day. Like, that's a beautiful way to make art.
I think that's an approach that Robert and Guy both had, which is, you know, remove the exposition from the plot as much as possible so that the audience aren't left confused. But audiences are really smart, and that's the thing that I think isn't given credit to in terms of the approach that people have. They tend to think less of their audience. We've been watching narrative since we were infants.
Yeah.
And there's a natural human instinct to create narrative when you see somebody who's, you know, doing up their shoe and picks something up off the ground out on the street as you're waking to cross the street, and you immediately invent a story.
Right.
As you see it happen. We cannot help doing it. You don't need to give too many clues.
Yeah.
We are doing it, and if you give the right clues subtly enough, we'll be there. And in the meantime, they wanted to focus on the relationships between the characters, and that's why I think they work so well, was that brilliant dynamic between Robert and Jude.
And I feel like Moriarty is one of the most iconic villains, but it was able to be so subversive in that it wasn't the exposition version. It was able to be about the relationship. It was able to be about that flow that you guys made on the day. But when you first got the idea of playing Moriarty, how much of your preconceived notions of like what Sherlock is to Moriarty, what did you want to bring to it to make it unique, since he is so iconic?
Well, I remember the conversations that I had with them, which was a sort of very nervy conversation to have, was you're going to have to do something that you're not predisposed to doing, which is the only way this character is going to stay viable throughout the story is he cannot lose in his encounters with Sherlock Holmes every single time. And that's the way that they would do it with, here's your main character, and then you meet off with the person, and someone either has the last line, or they beat them in some situation, and that person keeps coming back. You go, you're not going to be able to maintain that credibility with the audience. He has to actually be on the same par, particularly because at the end of the film, Sherlock decides that the only way he can resolve the situation and beat this person is to take him with him.
Yeah.
So that he actually has to be more dangerous than Sherlock Holmes, and the reason is he has no moral compass, which means he can do anything. And Sherlock's moral compass is a weakness because there are certain things he can't do.
Right. It's the Venom to Spider-Man problem.
He's more dangerous than Sherlock Holmes.
Now, is that the draw for you as an actor to play? I know you like to be in a position that you've not played before. Was that a big, compelling reason to take on that role?
I hadn't done something like that before. I really loved Guy's movies. I'm a big fan of Robert, so I knew Jude a little bit. In the screenplay, I was told immediately, listen, everything's going to change, but here's the building blocks of it,
Yeah.
And then I was told, listen, you sit down with Guy and with Robert, and you'll be able to work this story out, this character out between the two of you, and find a version of this character that makes sense for you as well. And Guy's thing as well was, this is the first uber supervillain, in literature. Conan Doyle creates the first uber villain. He's the first version of Blofeld, or whatever you want to make that. And in that sense, we want him to be iconic.
So going to Spielberg, another insane performance. I loved your Grant. This role is not an easy one, and when you play someone historical in fiction or nonfiction, is the script more important to you, or do you try to get so much of the non-fiction elements of the character that you can find to shape them?
I mean, the most important element of that was Spielberg and then Daniel Day-Lewis,
Sure.
So yeah, you're going to leap up and down at the opportunity. So, and then Grant, I had what everybody else has, is this sort of completely misguided conventional wisdom understanding of who this person was. And when I did the deep dive on him, you realize that he's probably one of the most maligned historical figures in American history. Should be, really, the quintessential American success story, I mean, when the war breaks out, he's selling firewood at the side of the road to help feed his family, and 8 years later, he's president.
Yeah.
An amazing story. But largely, his story was written by the people who lost the war.
Right.
And, a year after the war ends, J.G. Pollard writes the Lost Cause narrative, when it's the beginning of that, the reframing of what the whole war is about, which people are still confused about today. And part of that was to really, trash and destroy Grant's reputation and his legacy. But if you go to any military academy in the world, his campaigns are taught. And his Vicksburg campaign is considered on par with Napoleon's campaign, his Austrian campaign.
Wow.
So I went and did all this research, I read his memoirs, and then you come back and then, similarly, a similar thing happened with the Warhol is, well, you have all this information, but you really only need about 5% of it.
Is that a benefit for you, though, as an actor, to get to learn the 95% you don't need because you get to grow?
Yeah, I mean, again, the principal at my drama school said, when a pianist sits down at the piano, you don't play all the notes at once, You play chords, you play notes, but the notes that you play resonate off the ones you aren't playing. So,
oh, I love that. I love that, especially for gathering information. Yeah. I love to have the butterfly effect of life, because things you learn from that are going to affect the rest of your work, not just that work.
Yeah.
Was there anything all these years later, I think it's been like 9 years since that movie, that a direction from Spielberg that really struck a chord that resonates on your other work?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things I got from him. One was just pure joy. The pure joy of filmmaking. You can see that enthusiasm and love that was there in his earlier work, and as a kid almost, it's right there every single time. He's just so excited.
Yeah.
There is a pleasure and a joy and enthusiasm and excitement. I mean, I remember at one point they were resetting some of the background, and this troop, a cavalry troop, had to go and reset. And as they whirled around and they went back, the guy had the flag fluttering like this as the whole thing went by, and he just went, oh boy, that just never, my heart stirs every time I see that. And he was incredibly accessible. The biggest star on a Spielberg set is always Spielberg.
Sure.
You know, I mean, everybody wants to talk to him because he's shaped these incredible experiences of everybody's life.
Yeah.
And he, you know, obviously he's got a job to do, but he's available, he's accessible, you know, and he understands that. And the other thing that I got from him was movement, always movement. And he's looking to how he can describe what's happening through, obviously through the dialogue and the character, but also through movement, either through the character or through moving the camera. But he's constant. The story's always in momentum, always. There was one point where it's a scene that didn't make it in, and it's after they've had the vote and it's been passed, and he realizes that the war's going to continue, and that probably means another 1 million people dead or something, 500,000 people dead. And I knew that Grant was hoping for my research that Lincoln would agree to see the peace commissioners from the South, so the war could come to an end earlier. He's told to keep them there, and that means more people are going to die. And the way that Spielberg decided to tell that moment was he gets the message, he turns around and leaned against the post, staring out, and then with his hand behind his back, picked up his hat and turned around and put his hat on, and then, okay, back to business.
Motion.
You know?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Another director that I think really understands the frame and motion, maybe my favorite director, not to pick favorites, but David Fincher has meant the world to me forever. And I think that Benjamin Button is one of those films that will be rediscovered every 10 years by new people. And the movie itself just has this beating heart of open emotionality. And I think that comes from the repetition Fincher does. I think he finds things in his actors. Did you discover anything about your process in the way he shoots, since he does it so differently and so many times?
Yeah, I'm going to go quickly back to the Spielberg thing, because the other thing that I think people don't appreciate is he's got an incredible sense of humor.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, and a lot of the things that you find, like the when Michael Stuhlbarg, when as Yeoman he gives his vote, I asked Michael about that, and he said, no, it was just written as I say I, and it was just one line. And Spielberg said, okay, the first time just mouth it. Second time, whisper it, and then the third time, leap up, right?
Yeah.
He's got great, and an understanding of how you can use humor to release tension, but if you've used humor, that you don't lose all of that tension, do you know what I mean? You can come back again.
It's that diaphragm thing, where if you're too tense, you don't get to experience it, so you either laugh or cry, and I think Jurassic Park really finds that, moments of brevity.
Actually, someone, again, a fantastic sense of humor, quite wicked, his sense of humor. And incredibly protective. Obviously he's famous for doing all these takes and everything. I loved it because you never went home feeling that you left an idea unexplored.
Yeah.
If there is any pressure coming onto the set because there's an expectation about schedules, whatever, it doesn't get to anybody else. He's the person who says it stops here with him, and you're all good, don't worry about it. And I was really touched by his friendship with Brad as well. They was very sweet. They had this a very touching camaraderie with each other. They had a sort of shorthand for talking to one another, and almost like nicknames, I think. I found that really sweet. I do remember my first proper scene. There were about 40 cameras like that. And I'm looking at it, trying to figure out which one's the fucking camera. Where do I pitch my performance? And he went, oh yeah, sorry, it's a little bit like a science experiment. He goes, yeah, no, that's the camera. These are all reference cameras. And basically he said, don't do anything for the first 10 takes. Just get a good idea of what's happening around you. Settle in. Because I erase all the first ones, and I wait until the camera's moving, I've got background moving, I've got picture cards moving. So once I've orchestrated all of that, so it's happening in the way that I'm happy with, then I'll say, now I'm going to be keeping these ones. So just settle in and watch and have an idea of what you can use, and then I'll let you know when to start. Like, because if you give you the performance on take 4, I'm erasing it.
That's genuine play. That's really cool to be like in a space where you can like almost like a stage in that way. The dark joy of David Fincher is one of my favorite things about his work. I think that Fight Club is one of the best comedies of all time. It's completely misread and I love that movie, but I find Captain Mike is very much a David Fincher type to me. Like that character's got a dark joy to him and he's an artist. There's a lot of that to me. Was that a development with him?
It's interesting because when I auditioned and after I was given the role, and I talked to him, he just said, I went and did a sort of camera tests, and he went and said, just somewhere here, you know, it's not here, somewhere right there, maybe you can't quite see it on your peripheral vision, is John Belushi in Animal House.
I love that note. Just off center.
Yeah, just like, right, you can't quite catch it, like right there.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. What a great note to drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, his work is so consistently, like the type of laugh you get out of his work is so unique to his work. And another one that I love is Steven Soderbergh's comedy, I feel like is also very unique to him. And it's almost like a play of an ensemble without leads, but he casts all leads. And it's a really unique thing to see a director grab 20 of the biggest people and let them go at it. Is the set as spontaneous as it feels, or is it precise and then you let them run?
Yeah, I mean, I remember showing up, I mean, that was just one scene. And he operated the camera, and he just basically said, I'm going to try and stretch this out to lunchtime.
Oh, that's what I want. That's what I wanted to hear. That's amazing. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, and then we ad-libbed different things at the end because it was all about censorship and was he rapping? He was rapping, wasn't he? Yeah, it was censorship and like you can't say this, you can't say that. And then I came up with that line about, well, now that is gratuitous.
And it was all to make it go to lunch and it all got to stay and play. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, that actually, I was thinking Soderbergh led directly into Mr. Deeds for me, for whatever reason. And I was thinking that same kind of chaotic spontaneity that somehow feels precise. When working with the powerhouses like Adam Sandler and Winona Ryder doing comedy in that way, John Turturro, is it something where you come in with a plan and then you have to let it go? Or is it something where the comedy allows you to play the character you intended?
Well, I mean, I do remember that really clear as well. I remember the auditioning for it. I had a pretty good idea of the ridiculousness of that character.
Sure, 'cause it's a lot.
But then when you get to set, you know, Adam is I think very unusual in that for a comedian, in that he wants other people to be funny. You know, I remember auditioning for a movie called National Security, and I was told not to be funny because, you know, the main guy wouldn't like that.
Sure.
And I said, I don't know what to do. I prepared my audition, like, you know, I've got to do it the way I prepared it, you know, but you'll decide. And I auditioned, he went, that was very funny, Jared.
So.
Yeah. But Adam Sandler wanted people to be funny. He'd show up every day. When he wasn't in the scene, he'd still be there. He's looking for jokes. Wow. He's looking for jokes from other people. Like, if you say this, that'll be funny. If that person does this, if this person who's just got one line, do it this way and that'll get a lot. You know what I mean? He was so excited when other people brought stuff and did stuff that helped keep the momentum going, keep the comedy ball up in the air, you know? I think that's pretty rare.
Doing punch-ups on your day off is incredible. That's love. That's film. Oh, that's beautiful. And that also brings me to Ivan Reitman, who notoriously was able to punch up on the day all the time. And you worked on a movie with not just Ivan Reitman, but also the geniuses of Billy Crystal and Robin Williams. I cannot imagine the energy on that set. What was it like to be, that's like the height of everyone's power and energy. Yeah. What was that like?
Robin was just a king, man. He was just so lovely. Just such a, you know, I mean, I remember we were shooting a scene, it was in the casino, and I think it's in that room with all the slot machines in it. And it's taken a while, and we're doing it different ways, and Ivan's got a lot of different ways he might put the scene together. So he did it once on a steady cam that might go the whole way through, then he did some more conventional coverage, because, you know, it's all about rhythm, and you don't know what you're going to need at that point in the story. Yeah. So, you know, he's giving himself options. So it took half a day to do. And obviously it's Robin Williams, and he's sitting there and he's chatting to extras and stuff like this. And somehow one of the extras was leaving. He was like looking at his watch. He was hoping we'd get done because he had to get on a plane to go back east because his mother was sick or something like that. we had to reshoot this scene about, I don't know, months later. Robin saw that extra, went up to them and said, "How's your mum?"
Wow. That is beautiful. Oh, what a beautiful soul. That's amazing. I love that. I think that film is one of those ones that I told you this weekend I went back and watched a lot of 90s stuff, and it's really beautiful to watch that era of comedy with those two, and just the heart of Billy Crystal and Robin Williams is so apparent on screen.
Yeah, and they improvised, and they'd get told off because they were improvising too much. And Ivan says, can we just do the script? Okay, we'll do the script, and then we're going to, and I'm obviously difficult reining these guys in because they keep sniffing funny here, sniffing funny there, you know? And then, of course, it's difficult because, I think as a director, one of the object lessons that you would have is you look at Peter Sellers' later comedies because they don't work. And the reason they don't work is the first couple of takes, he'd do the script. And then he wouldn't do that again because he'd build on a joke and he'd get the laugh from the crew. Yeah. And then he'd build on that joke and get the laugh from the crew. Then he'd build on that joke and get the laugh from the crew. But so then you end up, you've lost that narrative thread. The thread's gone too. There's like a discipline between finding the humor, but also maintaining that tension of the narrative, And I know, I just remember Ivan, he obviously wanted them to improvise, but at the same time, it's like, we have to be I guess it's trying to improvise with a sense of the need of direction. The narrative was.
Yeah. There's a vector back in that.
And then Louis Lombardi and I, we were like, oh, we can improvise. We got told off. He goes, okay, enough of this shit. He goes, you look like two actors who are just trying to get more screen time. He went, yeah, we are.
That's pretty much. Well, I want to dip into drama before we head to TV because you also were in a Jim Jarmusch film, and I feel like Dead Man is a wonderful bit of poetry. Dead Man. Do his scripts read like poetry, like the movies
script?
Do? Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Well, I didn't get a script. That came about because I did a movie called Blue in the Face. Blue in the Face came about because of the rehearsals for Smoke. So Smoke was about this sort of group of, there's a cigar store in Brooklyn. And the rehearsals we were improvising. And Paul Auster and Wayne Wang said, God, this is great, we should do this movie. Right? So after we'd shot Smoke, they persuaded Harvey to give them $500,000 to go and do this improvised film called Blue in the Face, based around these characters. And then, of course, Madonna's involved, RuPaul was involved, Michael J. Fox was involved, Roseanne was involved, Jim Jarmusch was involved. Yeah. And at the wrap party, I made a big enough fool of myself, dancing with Mel Gorham, that he went, I think this guy would be fun. And he then asked me to come and do Dead Man. And basically all he said is, there's no script. What it is you three are out, you're like your fur trappers out in the wilderness, and Johnny's character comes in, finds your camp, and there's a fight over baked beans or something, and then you shoot Billy Bob in the foot, and then all of you die. But there's a big argument and you die. And it was really left to Iggy and Billy Bob and myself to come up with, okay, well, who are these people? And then Iggy was in a dress, so we were like some lunatic nuclear family out in the American West. So I was the truculent, stroppy teenager, Billy Bob was the dad, and Iggy was the mother in the dress. And we decided that we were like complete lunatics, and that we had a thing of, when you came across somebody lost in the wilderness, whoever found them, they owned them. And then they could lend them to the other person for trade, but the pleasure of killing them came to the person who found them, because we were all fucking nutcase serial killers. Yeah. Right? So then that's what the argument was going to be about. It's like, who actually was going to kill it whilst the guy's there? It's like, what are these guys talking about? I found him, so I get to kill him, right?
That is a beautiful way to come up with the narrative, just on the day, like kids playing in the woods, because it is.
And then we took what we had to Johnny and improvised with Johnny. And then, of course, he came up with all this brilliant stuff as well.
And around that same time, you were in two movies that I think have been on more college dorm room walls than Scarface. Between Natural Born Killers and Iggy Goes Down, I don't think I've ever seen more of the blockbuster era. Oh, everywhere.
Really,
Iggy?
Is it?
I'm from Boston, so I feel like that type of school kid loved that movie.
God,
and I don't know if it's unique to the Northeast, but I saw more there.
I hope Burr knows that, because that would please him so much.
Oh, it did really well in my college experience.
Because it was a sort of cinematic Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a good angry kid trying not to be angry experience. And I feel like those two movies were long enough ago. I know you watch a lot of movies. When you rewatch things from that part of your career, is it you remembering on set, or do you get to actually watch them now?
That is long enough ago that the on-set experience doesn't intrude too much any longer.
That era of filmmaking, I think, is so unique to the spontaneity of like the voyeuristic director, but also the people at the time, because we were coming down from the 80s into the more aggressive 90s. And I think another movie you did, which I love as an Irishman, Patty in Far and Away, is this wonderful fantasy escape of like to be American and have things work and not work. With your dad being Irish, was that something that pulled you to that script because it's so much about that story?
No, I mean, at that point, I was just trying to get I'd done a movie already, but I was just trying to do my first American movies at that point. And I got Last of the Mohicans and Far and Away in the same phone call.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was thrilled. And it obviously is working with Ron, and I've seen a lot of his movies, and obviously Tom Cruise is major. Yeah, I mean, my memories of that are shooting in Ireland, which was great, on the West Coast. Meeting Tom for the first time was in a parking lot, and when he smiled, it was like this, oh my God, right in front of you. So, because you'd seen it on screen so much, it's such a sort of major part of his persona. There's this immense energy that comes out of him, and very positive energy that comes out of him, you know? You don't feel like not much is gonna get in his way, you know? And very gracious, very humble. There's two things that come to mind. One was, we were staying in this town called Dingle, and we were there over a weekend, and we'd arranged to play a little football match with the locals. And I said to Tom, we're going to go play footy. Do you want to come play footy? He said, I don't know how to play. And I went, don't worry about it. We're playing with kids, you know? He said, well, I said, listen, let me tell you, they're still talking in this town about Ryan's daughter, about Robert Mitchum and Trevor Howard sitting in those seats in a pub. Come and play football. They'll talk about it for the next 100 years.
Yeah.
And he showed up and he played with the locals, with the kids. And that night at the bar, one of the kids was standing by at the end of the bar, and his dad was the barman. And all night long he went, Dad, 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 Dad. He goes, what? I played footy with Tom Cruise. All right, I know. Dad, 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 what? I played footy with Tom Cruise.
And I guarantee he still talks about it. I guarantee somewhere in Dingle that guy attends bar.
Yeah, I mean, it was just very sweet. And then the other thing that happened was we were doing this thing where it was that scene where we have the big fight on the hillside. And we were trying to figure out how do we get from that field further down. And so we just came up with this thing to help us move the blocking. But in it, I did this thing where I ran down the hill and then leapt and kicked him, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't tell Ron and the producers that I was going to do that. So when they saw me do it on the take, because of their perspective, it looked like I fucking belted him right in the stomach. And everybody leapt up behind camera going, oh my God, what the fuck's he done? What the fuck's he done? Right? And cut, okay, so Tom, are you all right? He goes like, yeah. He goes, but Chad, did he hit you in the stomach? He goes, no, he was 5 feet away from me because of perspective, right? You know, he goes, oh, great, well, we'll keep doing it. And he goes, it looks so good. And the set photographer goes, yeah, I got some great pictures. And Tom says, I'd just like a couple of those. I said, I'd like a couple as well. And he goes, okay. I said, I bet you get them and I don't. He went, I bet you do get them. What do you want to bet? I said, a pint of Guinness. He goes, okay, a pint of Guinness, that you get the same pictures. 2 days after I arrived home, a photograph album comes from Tom Cruise with the pictures in. And a little note saying, you owe me a pint of Guinness.
That's beautiful.
So I met Tom not long ago, and I told him that the pint of Guinness is in my will. So I know I owe you a pint of Guinness. So I don't know when I'm ever going to see you, but it's in my will.
The long game. The really long game.
Yeah, I'm not going to be outdone.
I'm a man of my word. Post-mortem.
Just like you.
That's a 30-year pint of Guinness to be delivered. That's wonderful.
It's longer than that, man. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 92, yeah. I mean, a Michael Mann phone call that also is a Ron Howard phone call is a hell of a phone call. But going over to TV, those are the brief moments. But you've also lived in TV for a while, long gaming these characters. And Mad Men is, I'm going to be totally frank, the first show that I ever formed a ritual around. I loved Mad Men so much that I started doing my laundry on Sundays and ironing and drinking whiskey and watching Mad Men.
Wow.
It became a tradition that I would like find like this peace, and like it was just a wonderful ceremony for me. Was there anything from that time that started to affect your day-to-day because you lived in such a specific period that was so clean cut, that was so regimented in that world?
Shaving. You had to shave every fucking day, man. You know? That's why you see a lot of the cast when during the break, they'd all grow beards.
Just to relieve.
Just that thing shaving every goddamn day. Yeah, I mean, you know, you couldn't show up with dirty nails and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And you had there was a very clear focus on the presentation, the visual aspect of it, and in a way, Janie Bryant was kind of the super weapon, the secret weapon of that show, because the way that she worked hand in hand with the set designer, they knew what color palette they were working with, and they made this plan ahead of time so that they knew. I mean, if you watch it and you look at the way that they have play off one another, the production designer and Janie Bryant, it's just amazing. And then it was very strict in terms of the work, and you weren't allowed to obviously change anything. And on my first day on set, I had to do a retake because I'd left out an apostrophe.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I think in that episode where we get drunk and go and see the Godzilla movie, and I talk gibberish, I had to do it again because I didn't say the gibberish that was in the script. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? It's gibberish.
That's beautiful. That's what it felt like, and that's why the show, I consider that the show, right before the streaming wars, like the Mad Men, Breaking Bad was what I think transitioned to this golden age of TV. Was there a moment you felt
I mean,
that?
you know, The Sopranos was before that. People made plans for Sunday because of The Sopranos.
Yeah?
You know, and what's interesting was The Wire was on at the same time, and it was overshadowed by The Sopranos. And it really wasn't until the last season of The Wire that people started to cotton on to how fucking brilliant The Wire was as well, you know? So yeah, I mean, I brought that with me to the Mad Men set, an understanding of that kind of narrative. And of course, you know, Matt Weiner worked on The Sopranos.
Right.
And a lot of what he learned from that and working with David Chase, he brought that to either stuff that worked on The Sopranos and stuff that didn't work, to make sure they didn't make, from their point of view, similar mistakes.
Was there a moment on the set for you all that you realized what a zeitgeist shift Mad Men
Well, I joined in 3.
But it was
already that.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, because I remember that being everywhere.
I mean, to give you an idea I go to the premiere episode of season 3, which was done at the DGA building, where they were going to show, I think, the first 2 episodes. And there's a press line and everything like that, and no one had seen the show yet, so the press weren't that interested in me. So I was standing next to the head of AMC and the head of Lionsgate, and they were absolutely jonesing on. They'd made a deal with the Banana Republic shops.
Yeah.
And Janie Bryant had a deal to produce clothes, Mad Men clothes, 3 outfits for men, 3 outfits for women, that were going to be sold all across the stores, across America, with Mad Men signage. And they were going 3.5 miles of storefront across the USA. Can you believe that? It's kind of amazing. They weren't talking about like all the Golden Globes and Emmys and nominations that they'd received and stuff like that, because we're in award season as well. It was the 3.5 miles of storefront across the United States.
At the premiere.
That's what they understood at that point, what that was going to do.
I've never thought of a translation from an executive standpoint of like how much space we've covered with our might. That is incredible. Now, Mad Men, I also think led beautifully, I said, into the golden age of TV, but Chernobyl's got this ominous power that when people talk about it, it kind of changes the tone of the conversation. We actually have this in honor of you, this Geiger counter right here. Yeah. It's an actual Geiger counter.
3.6.
So
not bad, not good.
With the ominous nature of the show and the ominous nature of when it was airing, because it came out in 2019, what did you do to stay like joyous? Like how you're a very like, you enjoy life, and that show and the world was dark.
Well, you know, Stellan and Emily are just great fun. They're always just, they go to that other place, you know, because you can't stay in that spot the whole time.
Yeah.
Because then you get numb. So you have to go and distract your mind in between setups. I mean, unless someone has got some like really, really massively wrenching emotional thing, and then you leave them alone, you know, because they try and keep it like hovering near them, but not right there. But on that one, yeah, we would just entertain one another, and you know, it was also during I think it was the World Cup, so England were playing Sweden, so there was a lot of good rivalry between Stellan, Johan, Emily and myself. Yeah, you just keep it light, you know, whilst you're on set. Also, it was fascinating because the sets were amazing, you know. We shot at an actual nuclear power station at Ignalina, which is the same model as the RBMK reactor as the one at the Chernobyl site. It was also an intense schedule, so you also didn't have time to
really dwell too much.
Yeah, you had to get moving. You're on to the next one, on to the next one. I mean, I shot 3/4 of my role in the first 4 weeks.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is a lot of intense work.
Yeah.
Now, you directed an episode of Mad Men.
I did.
And you've also worked with a lot of these directors, but do you want to direct again? Is there anything you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, you know, yes, I would. There's a few things that I'd like to do. I have total respect for what directors do, though, and I think as we sort of move forward into this technological age, there's a greater and greater, you have to have a bigger understanding of what that is. I mean, you know, on Foundation, I work with Alex Graves, and just his understanding of what he wants to see, what he needs, is just so exact. I mean, he's a joy to work with. He's great fun, and he knows exactly what he needs, and yet he's also alive too. I didn't think you were going to do that. Hang on a second. I'm going to have to just give me a second whilst I recalibrate how I'm going to get this, because I need to get that.
Wow.
You know? So he's alive to what's happening. There's other directors, they sit there and they go, well, I've got my storyboards. So, you know, no, if it's not, you have to, in the storyboard, you're standing over there. And you're to the right a bit where I can see you silhouetted in the window.
So learning from directors on the day is only going to improve the whole experience for the set and for your view of it. Yeah,
so yeah, I would. Although, to be fair, to be honest rather, you know, directing an episode of Mad Men in the last season, the show at that point is more or less directing itself, right? I would suggest shots to the DP, and he would go, it's great, I love it, but I'm not doing it. Because I know Matt will never use it.
Oh.
So it's going to take me an hour to set this up, and we've got 2 hours to shoot this.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing it, because he won't use it, but it's a good idea. You know?
So you got your flowers, but not your shot. Like you knew the image was there.
And again, that was the point. That's why Matt could let me do it, because he knew the machine was built enough that, I mean, the train had left the station and they knew what the thing was supposed to be. And my role really is, I'm not going to tell John Hamm how to play Don Draper or Elizabeth Moss how to play that, but they know those characters inside out. My role would be to help the people who are just coming on for this episode to get the deer in the headlights out of their head, because they're going, oh my God, I'm in the scene with John Hamm or Christina Hendricks. Try and get them to calm down, and then try and help them find what they need to find in the part, solve problems for them, and then with the regulars, because they would only have gotten the script the day before or something, to go, and I've had it for a month, to go, okay, this scene relates to the scene we haven't shot yet, and it ties in because this is the narrative thread that goes to there, and just help them, remind them of that, because they've read it the night before, 2 days before, and they have the whole thing in their head, and they're still trying to piece together where do I need to place some value, what do I need to put importance on.
It's So many spinning plates. That is a lot of moving parts. Well, one last question, then I got a speed round for you. But my last question. You've enjoyed so many types of art as an artist, be it plays, be it movies as a consumer and making them. But you played Andy Warhol, who I think has one of the most unique perspectives on art I've ever heard. How did embodying him change how you view art, and how do you define art?
God, that's a... I'm not gonna say it! I'm not gonna say it!
We almost got him! Down to the wire! So close!
He had an interesting approach, and that was that it was called The Factory for a reason, and it was conceptual, and the execution was almost not as important as the concept. So in that way, maybe a little bit like Hitchcock, because he had already made the movie in his mind, and now it was just the practicality of actually, achieving that. I think that he also understood that art could come from anywhere, and you're most likely going to have to steal it from somebody else. So he did, the whole thing with Valerie was that Valerie was upset that he'd stolen pieces out of her screenplay or manifesto, and he did.
Yeah.
But at the same time, his was, well, you can steal from me, I don't care. And that was the whole idea of The Factory, was they'd all steal from each other, and if you could make something out of it, well, good for you. Yeah. But I didn't see that in there, but good for you. Yeah, that was a really important moment for me in my career. And I do remember, again, that was one of those examples where I did a load of research and then went back to the script, and I only needed about 10% of it. But what was useful was when something didn't work on set and Mary wanted to try and change it, I go, well, we could do this, because you remember there was this moment when this happened with Warhol, and went, okay, that's good. Now she, being a documentarian, knew all of the references that I was referring to, so she'd go, okay, yeah, that's a good idea, let's do that, change it slightly. But the other thing that I got out of that was he was a tremendous gossip.
Sure.
And for a while, I became a huge gossip. And I'm not a gossip in real life. But I would sit on the phone and gossip with my mother a lot.
I love that it affected your day-to-day.
Yeah,
That's
I would
beautiful.
ask her questions about her personal life that I would know. And she's like, what's going on? I'm having this conversation with Jared. Yeah, I know. It's like, because he loved to find out what people were up to.
Yeah.
He lived vicariously. As a person, I had the idea that he was quite timid. He was very vulnerable. You see, when he's standing, he's always doing the fig leaf because he's got his hand over his nuts.
Yeah, he's protecting himself at all times.
He's very protective, and I don't think that, my feeling was that he wasn't physically able, didn't feel that he was physically able to confront what was going on in the world. And that's another reason why he needed people around him to try as barriers towards anything bad getting towards it.
I feel like I've loved the idea that art is anything that makes you feel. And I always loved that he, even if it meant stealing, made people feel. And I love that take on how he just saw it as anything that gets you there. That's what matters.
I know but I do. There was one thing, I went as research, there's a Warhol Institute in New York, and I went to go and look at something there. So they have these time capsules. So so much stuff would come in every day to the factory that they would put stuff in these boxes and seal them up, and the boxes would have the day on it, right?
Wow.
And he'd put his receipts in, if he went to a play or he went somewhere to the museum, whatever, he'd put everything that happened during that day, he'd put into these boxes. And stuff would come in as well. So they're opening one of these time capsules and there's a videotape. They pop the videotape in and it's Warhol. And Warhol is sitting to have his portrait done. And at that point, I was still struggling to try and get a feeling for who he was inside of the facade. He's sitting on this stool and he's in this sort of neutral pose, and he's going to have his portrait done. This guy comes in, he's kind of in jeans, and they're chatting away a little bit, and it jumps forward, and the guy gets this board with the paper on it and leans it against the wall at an angle, and then he takes his jeans off, right? And then he takes his underwear off and he sticks the pencil up his arse, right? Rubber end first, and then starts to draw Warhol's portrait with the pencil up his bum. And I was like, okay, if he doesn't laugh now, he's dead inside, right? Because it's fucking crazy. Yeah. And he'd sit there, and whenever the person turned away, he'd look at the other person and just go, and he went, okay, there's someone in there who's commenting and understanding, and this is his wall, you know?
That's beautiful. I love that so much. So my last thing for you is there any question that you either ask someone to get to know them better, or any great question that has changed who you are philosophically? What's your great question?
I'd rather do the speed round. That's my question.
You're gonna do the speed round.
Can I do the speed round?
All right, that's his question. Okay. What's the last thing that you watched?
Andor.
Last thing that you read?
I am reading The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz.
Last thing that you saw that made you nostalgic?
Not last thing I saw, but last thing I heard is Allegra listens to this YouTube channel that plays like 1940s music, but as though it's coming from the other room, or there's sounds of like surf in the background, or it's like a weird, very weird, evocative thing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What's your comfort movie?
My comfort movie, I love Tootsie.
Tootsie. What's a movie you love to share with others?
Coy Jandreau.
Ooh. What's a movie or play or anything that you've been a part of that you most want other people to discover?
Well, I mean, I would like people to because it's still kind of, it's an underground cult classic, The Terror.
The Terror,
yeah.
Okay. The Terror. So that is it, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. I loved this whole journey.